Grammar rule number 15. This is our final grammar rule. Grammar rule number 15, redundancy, page 95. If you have watched the video for grammar rule 14, you know that this is on a page with a heading other rare rules, because along with double negatives, grammar rule 14, redundancy is one of the least common rules that shows up on the SAT. You might go several tests without seeing a single redundancy error. However, as I said in the video for double negatives, if you want an extremely high score, you're going to be aware of and be able to deal with this error as well. Redundancy is a tricky rule because there is no consistent tip-off clue. You are really just going to have to scan sentences for repeats in meaning. You are basically going to have to look at what you have underlined, and in addition to checking any other rule that might be indicated by that particular tip-off clue. So, if you have an adjective underlined, you're going to have to check adjective adverb, and you also are going to have to think about whether that adjective is saying exactly the same thing as something else in the sentence. And that brings up another really important point about redundancy. Redundancy on the SAT is very specific. It literally means redundancy. It doesn't mean more vaguely that you think that there's something in the sentence that the sentence can do without. So for instance, if you see something like he jumped from over 6 feet above the water, it's not that high, it's kind of a weakling, but if he jumped from over, I'm going to get rid of this adjective here, he jumped from over 6 feet above the water. If over 6 feet was underlined, some students are going to say, well, you don't need the over because that's redundant. You don't really need that. You could just say he jumped from 6 feet above the water. Over adds something to this sentence. It adds more detail to the sentence. Jumping from 6 feet above the water and jumping from over 6 feet above the water are two different things. Some students might think you don't need the over because you're already saying above the water, but that's not how over is functioning in this sentence. Over is describing not where the guy was. It is actually describing the 6 feet. This is over 6 feet. So we have extra detail being added by this over. So you got to be careful of looking at words and just saying, well, I think the sentence could do without that. That's not what redundancy is about. Redundancy is about having two words or a word and a phrase that mean exactly the same thing and are serving exactly the same function in the sentence, and therefore getting rid of one will not affect the sentence at all. It will not affect its meaning. It will not affect its structure. Go ahead and do examples 3 and 4. These will be tricky because nothing is underlined, so you're going to have to scan through these sentences and try to find words or phrases that mean exactly the same thing and that might be extraneous. Examples 3 and 4. Go ahead, pause the video, do them on your own. In example 3, we do have temporary policies implemented last year have simultaneously increased attendance and at the same time encouraged participation. Some students say that the increasing attendance and the encouraging participation are redundant. Those are not redundant. Those are two completely different ideas. Getting people to class and getting people to participate once they're in class are two different ideas. So those are not the redundant items here. What is redundant in this sentence is the simultaneously and at the same time. Simultaneously means at the same time. So getting rid of one of these two, what it does is simply reduce the size of the sentence by 4 words. In other words, it doesn't change the meaning at all, because we have already said simultaneously here. We do not need to say at the same time here. In example 4, the company's board has generously agreed to make annual donations of food, water, and clothing each year to various charitable organizations throughout the city. Annual and each year mean the same thing. You do not need to say that they make annual donations each year, because when you say they make annual donations, you are saying they make each year donations. They make donations each year. So again, you do not combine annual with each year. One more time, keep in mind redundancy errors are very rare on the SAT. If you are seeing redundancy errors all over the test, you are wrong. They do not show up very often. If you see a redundancy error on a test, it's going to be the only one that you see. There is one redundancy error that has shown up a few times in the past that does have a very specific tip-off clue, and the tip-off clue is this: the reason ... is because. When you say the reason, you are about to indicate a cause, and when you say because, you are about to indicate a cause. So combining the reason and because is redundant. The fix for this, you might want to write down: use the reason is that, or because. You can just use because. You can just get rid of the reason and use because. There will be another slight change that needs to take place, but you can just use because. In example 5, go ahead and read through it. See if you can make the fix. There is the reason is because error in this sentence. Go ahead and do example 5. Press pause on the video. So in example 5, we have: the reason the phone no longer works is because Fritz dropped it in the sink. Stupid Fritz. So the reason is because, remember, that's our redundancy here. That's the specific tip-off clue. What we can do is we can either change the because to that, or alternately we can say the phone no longer works because because Fritz dropped it in the sink. So we can just use because. We would have to get rid of that is if we were making this second change, but that change is perfectly fine. That is it for redundancy. Keep in mind, one more time, redundancy is not common on the SAT. If you think you are spotting redundancy errors all over the place, or you are justifying a lot of your answers by saying that's redundant, you are wrong. You are using redundancy for the wrong reasons, and you probably need to stop. That is all for redundancy.